Okay, so let's dive into what's happening right now in London. It feels pretty major. The IMO's Marine Environment Protection Committee, the MEPC, they're in this special session. And people are calling it a real crossroads for shipping, right?
Absolutely, a crossroads. They're wrestling with this massive proposal, over 120 pages long, called the Net Zero Framework, or NZF. It's probably one of the biggest things the IMO's ever tried to tackle.
And what makes it so, I guess, so critical? Is it just targets or?
Well, it's more than just targets. The idea is this would be the first legally binding global rule book for, an entire industry sector's emissions. The big goal, net zero greenhouse gases from ships by, or maybe around 2050.
Net zero by 2050.
Okay.
Okay. And how do they plan to actually make that happen?
It's basically a two-pronged approach. You've got mandatory emission limits tied to fuel intensity,
Right.
and then there's a pricing element.
Ugh, the pricing, like a tax.
Exactly what the critics are calling it, yeah. A global carbon tax. Technically, it involves these twin fuel intensity targets. If a ship goes over the limit, it has to pay these sort of remedial costs every year.
Hold on, twin targets. What does that mean exactly? Is it like the fuel itself and how the ship runs?
You got it. That's the clever part, or at least the intention. One target looks at the carbon in the fuel you load, and the other looks at how efficiently the ship actually operates, how much fuel it burns to move cargo. So it pushes on both ends, fuel supply and ship tech.
Okay, that makes sense. Pushing
Easy.
both sides. But you mentioned a pricing stick. Is there a carrot too?
Yes, definitely. Ships that manage to switch over to these zero or near zero fuels, Z and Z fuels they call them, they get credits. And these credits come from this proposed IMO Net Zero Fund.
A fund. What's that for?
So the idea is that the money collected from those remedial costs, plus maybe other contributions, goes into this fund. And it's supposed to help developing countries get the green technology they need and deal with climate impacts. Some countries are pushing hard for that money to start flowing by 2029.
Right, but I bet that fund and the whole pricing thing is where the arguments start.
Oh, absolutely. That's ground zero for the clash.
Mm.
The main opponent we're seeing is the U.S., specifically the current Trump administration. Their argument is basically economic.
How so?
They're saying the NZF puts way too much burden on shipping, it'll drive up inflation for everybody, and crucially, it penalizes fuels like LNG and biofuels, which the U.S. has already invested a lot in as sort of transitional options.
And it's not just talk, is it? We've heard some pretty strong language coming out of Washington.
Extremely strong. It's quite unusual for the IMO. Threats of sanctions against countries that vote for the NZF, things like extra fees for ships, banning them from ports, even talk of visa restrictions for seafarers from those countries. It's really escalated things.
Wow. Sanctions over an IMO vote. That's intense. Is it just the U.S. pushing back?
No, there's another group, mainly 6 oil-producing countries. You're talking Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Venezuela, among others. Their attack is different, more legal or procedural.
Okay, what's their angle?
They're focused on that net zero fund. They argue that collecting money from companies and deciding how to spend it, well, that's not really what the IMO's main treaty, the MARPOL Convention, is supposed to do. They say MARPOL is purely technical, about ship standards, not managing global funds.
So one side says it's bad economics, the other says it's bad law.
Pretty much. And this leads to maybe the biggest threat to the whole thing actually passing.
Which is?
The U.S. and Saudi Arabia seem to be coordinating a push to change how IMO rules get adopted. Normally, it's this thing called tacit acceptance, basically. Amendments pass automatically unless enough countries object.
Okay, standard procedure.
Right. But they want to switch it to explicit acceptance. That means 2/3 of all member governments, individually, have to actively ratify it back home. The IMO itself has admitted this process, well, it almost never works because it's so cumbersome. It looks like a way to just kill the framework through procedure.
So basically, try and change the rules of the game at the last minute to stop it.
That seems to be the strategy. And if this whole thing falls apart, if they don't get a unified global rule,
Then what? Chaos.
well, maybe not chaos, but definitely fragmentation. You risk ending up with a mess of different regional rules like the EU is already looking at. That creates huge uncertainty, makes it really hard for companies to invest the billions needed for new ships and fuels. Investment just stalls
And the vote itself sounds like it's going down to the wire.
completely.
Yeah.
It needs that 2/3 majority, which is 108 out of 176 states.
Yeah.
And reports say it's genuinely too close to call. That famous IMO spirit of cooperation might be breaking down.
Are there key countries to watch?
Yeah, people are watching big shipping nations in the EU, like Greece, Cyprus, Malta.
Hmm.
If they abstain, maybe because of industry pressure, that could sink it. It feels like this whole decarbonization thing has shifted. It's less about the environment now and more about pure politics and procedure.
Politics and procedure, yeah. Okay, so final thought then. Let's say, against the odds, it does pass this week. What happens next?
Well, that's the really provocative question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Even if they get the framework approved, there's still a mountain of work to actually finalize all the technical details and guidelines by 2027. But imagine this. If it passes despite this fierce fight, how does the global shipping industry even function when one of the world's biggest economies, the U.S., has basically already said they won't follow it in any way, shape, or form? That's a huge question mark hanging over everything.